Good morning, everybody. We have a great show coming your way today on GoJo and Golic. Here's what you have to look forward to that's coming up. Off the bone, that's what's happening to Dak Prescott's hamstring. He should probably be placed on IR. We will discuss all of that. Plus, We the North, Thursday Night Football, Ravens, Bengals. We will break it all down for you. Plus, we think it's the midseason. Our math ain't mathin', but we will go through the end-of-year awards, and we'll talk about where we think everybody is. We'll take a look at the guys' preseason picks, and spoiler alert, some of them are not great. All that and more, some great guests coming up on GoJo Golic.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield. We got a great show for you. We, as always, are presented by Campbell's Chunky, soup that eats like a meal. And we got a fun one today. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Jesse mentioned guests, my former head coach and the current head coach of the LSU Tigers. Brian Kelly going to join us ahead of Dad's biggest college football game of the weekend in terms of the combination of an actual rivalry, one that has been predicated on years of geography and certainly the shared bond of Nick Saban having coached both teams, but also now LSU versus Alabama at night in Death Valley, going to be the actual elimination game people have been looking for in college football's regular season, as both of those teams sit right on the cusp, Alabama at 11, LSU at 15 of the college football expanded playoff. So lots going on in Death Valley, and Brian Kelly, who has coached some of the most talkative centers in football history, going to join us here to talk about a little bit of that.
Yeah, how about it? You, Jason Kelsey, who's on New Heights. Talking to O linemen. But yeah, this is. There's going to be 2 lost teams making the top 12. There will not be a 3 lost team in the top 12. And Alabama and LSU both sit just outside, or Alabama in, but LSU outside the top 12 with 2 losses. So this. Listen, people who said the expanded playoff was going to be part of the ruination of college football along with NIL and the portal have been wrong, because the game is as good as the game has been on the field, and you still have these incredible matchups. So I'm so looking forward to this game.
Yep, I think some of the complaints are rooted in the fact of what I've always maintained, that people don't actually like parity that much. And when you've got it this year and no true star team that everyone has to point to, life gets a little bit harder to both assess and root for the demise of that team. But that's a story for another day. So that is what we've got coming up at the top of hour number 2 with Brian Kelly. But Dad, here and now, before we get to anything with Thursday Night Football, some big time news around one of the NFL's most, I'd say, polarizing quarterbacks, but really that's just by nature of being on the polarizing team. Dallas Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott, it was announced, is said to have a partial avulsion in his right hamstring, meaning the tendon was partially tearing away from the bone. And so as they've debated putting him on IR, Dad, there were reports from Jane Slater over at the NFL Network that this might not be a 4-week recovery for this kind of injury for Dak Prescott. And for anyone unfamiliar, you go on IR, you're missing a minimum of 4 games for that next portion of the season. And Dad, it does bring up the question with Dak Prescott and the way that this Dallas Cowboys season's going. You've talked about soft tissue injuries, which obviously take a long time to heal, and especially have difficulty during a season where you're still straining, you're going out there and putting yourself in dynamic situation. Now that you've got tendon tearing off bone, if the Cowboys season continues to spin down the drain, are we going to be talking about why is Dak Prescott even thinking about returning when it comes to 4 weeks if he gets on IR?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly that thought process. And, boy, just the thought of tearing off the bone just makes me think of a really good cooked rib, that just peels off the bone.
I'm glad that Dak Prescott's pain, this tough, incredibly gritty player, makes you hungry when you hear this, you sick man.
I mean, you just hear how succulent ribs are when they just peel off the bone. I mean, it's just so good, and I just can't get that vision out of my head. I feel bad for Dak, obviously.
Now I'm salivating. I feel like I am like hearing concert with you
when
now.
When you said the word succulent, I was like, I could taste it.
Yes, see?
This has got to be the only segment in America talking about Dak Prescott and this injury that has also said the word succulent within 20 seconds of the injury being announced?
I'm sorry. Listen, you get injuries of tearing stuff off the bone. Tyler Smith, the left guard in 22, tore his hamstring off the bone completely, needed surgery. So it happens. But more often than not, when you're talking about off the bone, you're talking about ribs and well-cooked ribs and slowly smoked ribs. So I'm sorry, I have that vision in my head. Okay.
Lathered up in some barbecue sauce.
Delicious.
Yeah. I'm salivating now as well. I feel like I need a wet nap for my fingers. I mean, holy smokes.
I feel like we need to apologize to Dak Prescott. We are not laughing in any way, shape, or form at the pain or plight of Dak Prescott. We're laughing at my father's inability to at any time be hungry. Forget being horny on Maine. My dad is hungry on Maine right now, and it is very unbecoming in this setting here, Dad. So as penance for making us all salivate and very hungry, what do the Dallas Cowboys do now? Cooper Rush has starred in pockets like this in the past where he went 5-1 during a season when Dak missed with injury before. It's a markedly different Cowboys team. So what does this mean for them short term? And Dad, now that they do have Dak Prescott signed to that deal, do they need to prioritize his health long term a lot more than salvaging whatever the hell this season's going to be?
So this comes down to conversations, right? As a player, and we were all athletes, Jesse, playing sports in college as well. Obviously, you're all athletes. You want to play, right? So you get injured, you want to get the okay from the doctor to heal, and you want to play no matter what part of the season you're in. Beginning part, obviously, middle, toward the end. If he went on IR, would miss 4 games, would come back, I think, December 9th or something like that. But players want to play. You know, they don't want to sit, and if he gets the medical clearance and the okay to play, he's going to want to play. I'm just going on the thought that I can't sit there and say across the board everybody would want to play. Someone may just say, hey, let's just bag the season and not re-injure this thing. But for the most part, athletes want to play in their sport once they get back from injury, no matter what the record is. And the Cowboys are going to be out of it. Let's make no mistake there. Washington 7-2, Philly 6-2, Dallas is 3-5 with no real. You can't look at this roster and say, yeah, they're going to make a run. It's very difficult to do. Now, stranger things have happened, but you just don't see it happening. So it's going to be, does the team take the helmet away from Dak and say, you know what, we're going to sit down. You've been medically cleared to play, but we feel it's in your best interest to sit the rest of the season. And that would obviously be waving the white flag saying, we're done. We have a healthy, rich quarterback who is supposed to lead this team and making the most money as a quarterback in the NFL, and we're choosing to sit him when he's healthy. That's waving the white flag and not wanting him to go into the offseason rehabbing an injury. I have a feeling once he's healed, he will be back on the field and playing again. This is just my thought. What he'll say as a player to try and get on the field. I just have a hard time believing, is for Mike McCarthy. I mean, Mike McCarthy is going to be kind of stuck in the middle, right? Because this guy's fighting for his job. So he would like the best quarterback out there to give him a chance to win instead of saving him for next year, which Mike McCarthy may not even be part of the team next year. So this obviously, as in all decisions, Cowboys is going to come down to a Jerry Jones decision.
Yeah, and this is, I think that Mike McCarthy scenario you laid out underscores the situation for the rest of the roster. There's a bunch of guys playing for the Cowboys now that aren't guaranteed next year, whether it's because they're older players on the verge of retirement, whether it's because they're guys that are the normal meat of the bell curve that have 2- and 3-year careers before it's all said and done. And so I think there is an acknowledgement, especially if you're Dak Prescott in this organization, like you're asking all these other guys to go out here and lay it on the line, play through varied levels of injury, and do that in a season that feels lost. If Dak Prescott's healthy and can be out there, he's going to be out there. He's going to push for that, and I'm sure the team is going to love having him back out there. But it's one of those things where you can afford, or then will be able to afford, being overly cautious. Like he'll have to be cleared with no worries or as few worries as you can, because if there is any issue there, Dad, we've seen already this season. I mean, especially when it comes to hamstrings, look only as far back as when we had Mike Evans injured in that that loss, honestly, to Monday Night Football against the Baltimore Ravens, where he came in with a hamstring strain already, goes and narrowly misses a touchdown pass in the back of the end zone, and now they've lost him for even longer. So that's the thing we know the Cowboys are going to be wired to avoid. But if he is somehow ready at any point down the stretch of the season, you're right. I agree, and I think he'll be back on the field, and I don't think there'll be many issues with that.
Yeah, and a lot depends on obviously the severity of the injury. If they say it's so wide ranging, an avulsion, a tear, because when you hear strain, it can be, the smallest tears, or it can be a different grade of a tear. Like I said, Tyler Smith had it completely torn off the bone, had surgery, missed the first 13 games of the season. So there are degrees of tear. And if they say this is a slight one and only miss a couple of weeks, maybe you take an extra couple of weeks just to make sure. But yeah, I think we both agree that once he's healed up, he is definitely going to want to be back on the field. And I think he will be back on the field. Unless it's an injury.
Slater again, who reported this.
Yeah, unless it's an injury that says, he needs to be out longer.
And to that point, Jane Slater, again, who originally reported this yesterday, covers the Cowboys in the NFL Network, said, "I'm told it typically takes more than a 4-week recovery for the partial avulsion of his hamstring tendon, which is partially torn off the bone. In some cases, they let it scar over, repair, and then strengthen. With that being said, Prescott is seeking other opinions, which is why there is currently a reluctance to place him on IR or make any determinations about a timeline for return." So they're still in the stage right now where Dak is trying to figure out exactly what the plan is going to be.
It's a small comparison, but in an offseason when I was a free agent, I tore my calf muscle running hills as a free agent, and I didn't get surgery. I just let, as you said, the scar tissue heal it over, and then I signed with the Dolphins, and basically the first time I broke into a sprint, the scar tissue tore. It's a chance, and obviously mine was in the offseason. He's going to be getting the best medical treatment in the world. I was in between teams, so I wasn't getting that type of treatment. So, and they're going to be obviously a lot more careful. But these injuries, when you say that very, very, very much accustomed to the scar tissue healing up an injury, and then the scar tissue obviously is weaker than the actual hamstring. So the ability to have a tear is going to be greater.
Yeah, and you skipped an important step in the process that Dak is going to try and go through, because his was scar over, repair, and then strengthen. You went scar over, strengthen, never repaired, and you paid the price for that on the back end when that thing decided to bust loose. So hopefully that important step in the process can be beneficial for Dak Prescott, so he does not succumb to the same issues there. They want him back on the field. Jesse, I want to get to this report we had yesterday. Andrew Berry, the Browns GM, talking about another quarterback that's off the field right now with injury and that might stay off the field in the future depending on what decision the Browns make.
Yeah, he had some comments about Deshaun Watson, and they were, take a listen, but intentionally vague here.
With Deshaun, I would say for any player with a season-ending injury and a major injury is first and foremost with the recovery and to make sure that he gets healthy from the Achilles injury. Everything else will deal with it.
How do you assess how he played, though, before he got hurt?
Yeah, I would say, more broadly, Tom, we didn't play well. We haven't played well as a team, and we haven't played well as a unit on offense.
I mean, what? What are they going to do about this? 2 years left on this massive deal with Deshaun Watson. He obviously hasn't lived up to it. Now he's injured, and I think a lot of Browns fans were hoping this would sort of be like, okay, we're going to move this guy along, but it sounds like that might not be the case.
Yeah, so this is to illustrate all of the complications of what Jesse just mentioned. Since making his debut in Cleveland, Deshaun Watson's 33.8 total QBR ranks 32nd of 33rd qualifying passers, higher than only Bryce Young with the Carolina Panthers. Andrew Berry can talk about the rest of the offense, but again, we've seen the rest of the offense perform well with different quarterbacks under center. The complicating factor is, you just mentioned, he's owed $46 million the next 2 seasons, but it gets worse. He's got cap hits of $72.9 million million in both seasons, both slated to be the second highest in the NFL. And if he was off the roster, he would take on dead cap hits, the Browns would, of $172 million next year and $99 million in 2026 if they were to part ways with him before this season. So, Dad, the money, which has always been the driver on a lot of this for the family that owns the Browns and has made this decision to begin with, might keep them from outright cutting him, but this should not stop them from drafting a quarterback this year and trying to find some cheap way to offset this, give your fan base hope, and give you another option under center because you can't put him back out there.
No, you can't. I mean, this is the Haslam's making, right? Because even, when Barry said it was everybody's decision to bring Deshaun, and this was a Haslam decision. He had to okay this fully guaranteed deal. So now you live by it, you die by it from a money situation. He can't be the quarterback of this team. And here's the thing. They're part of the, 9 2-win teams that we talked about yesterday. So you don't know where they're going to fall into the draft. If they're in position to draft a quarterback, because he is going to be obviously a monster cap hit, as you talked about, the next 2 years. Each of the next 2 years is $46 million in base and obviously over $70 million in cap hits. But if you can draft a quarterback, you draft one, because drafting a quarterback, you're on a rookie wage scale then. So it's not like you owe that rookie quarterback a lot of money. So you're going to have to live with paying another quarterback. You're going to have to, and one of the cheapest ways, the cheapest way is to just play a backup that you're barely paying anything. But you have to look like you're moving forward, right? And you're not moving forward with Deshaun Watson. You're just not. I mean, there's just too many examples of he's not the player he was in Houston, and probably not going to get that back after season-ending shoulder surgery, season-ending Achilles surgery. I mean, it's done. You have to admit, and that's the toughest thing for teams to do, is from a draft standpoint or a big signing standpoint, is admit you made a mistake. They made a mistake. Now, how do you work around it? And it's going to be painful fiscally. It's going to be painful for them, but they have to move on like they're just getting the next quarterback to help lead this team, of which they've been searching forever for, the next quarterback that's going to lead this team, and it's going to bite into them monetarily. But a rookie wage scale quarterback isn't as big a hit as signing a big-time free agent.
Just to underscore what an historically bad deal this was for them, the Russell Wilson trade and contract that we all talked about being such an albatross in Denver, when they cut him, he was over the next 2 years, the Broncos were assessed, or are in the process of being assessed, an $85 million dead cap hit. It was $53 million against the cap in 24 and $32 million against the cap next year. Deshaun Watson would be more than double that if they cut him this offseason over the next 2 years. Just such an insane burn of money and resources that went on in Cleveland in the name of a quarterback that stained the franchise in terms of reputation based on the off-the-field exploits, and on the field somehow made it, it was a nightmare in both arenas, and now the Browns are going to have to deal with the fallout there. So we will wait and see what decisions they ultimately made. That is going to be a story for another day here. I'm not even sure what prompted Andrew Berry to talk about this right now. But coming up next, let's talk about two teams that are actually relevant in the AFC North. We've got a Thursday night matchup for the ages. Actually, someone tell Al Michaels it's good this week. Ravens, Bengals preview next.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr., and Mike Golic Sr. here with you on a Thursday. And we have a big game set to kick off tonight between the Ravens and the Bengals. And guys, the Ravens are going to be sporting their new purple rising helmets. They did a whole reveal thing with the players. It was really cool. Are you in on the helmets? What is our take? How excited did you get when you saw the new merch?
All right, so here's where I'm at. I like this hue of purple. And I like the gold bars going over the top here. I'm not as jacked up, Dad, about the actual Raven mascot on the helmet itself. I think the sideways Raven is superior to the front-on Raven, which is the one they've got on the side of this helmet. What say you?
I am bad to talk about for alternate uniforms because I will lean toward the side of liking them all. I love when teams take a chance on uniforms. It's not a full-time thing. It's like when you guys played, Notre Dame, when you played your one neutral road game, the Shamrock Series.
Oh, we would play the Shamrock Series game every year, and we would do an alternate uniform, and every time our old guard fans would all hate it. And even now, I find myself being more opinionated, but I always have to go back to, and for these guys, when you're a player, you're so used to monotony. Everything is designed to be the same all season long, and especially at a place like Notre Dame, a proud franchise like the Ravens, that includes the uniforms. So when you get something a little bit different, like not everybody gets to be Oregon. So for the rest of us, when you get something a little bit different, even if it's kind of off the wall, I always love that stuff. I'm with you, Dad.
I do as well. So any kind of variation or tweak, I'm going to go with, because it's not permanent. So I am way less likely to criticize someone for giving it a shot, and trying it. So I like all the variations. I am always going to lean toward the side of, that's a cool thing, because they're doing it once or twice or however many times they're going to do it. So rarely will you get me to criticize, a uniform variation.
No, I agree. This also falls into the NFL color rush category, which is among my favorite things that's ever happened to the league. In the NBA, I would say it's up there with the in-season tournament courts, which took a little while. And I would go back and say that at the beginning of the color rush era, you also had some people hesitant to jump on board. But seeing just the one color, especially leading like all the way down to the socks and the helmets, I love it. It is just off the wall enough. It's the most college football that the NFL gets, Dad, is the color rush uniform, because it's the dumbest thing on paper that they do, and that's why it's the most enjoyable to me, who's a moron college football fan.
I love it. Yeah, I absolutely love it. So, like I said, you'll rarely get me to criticize any kind of color rush or uniform variation. I'm all for it.
I'm waiting for the text from super producer Brandon Newman, who is the diehard Ravens fan on our staff, to get the verdict on whether or not he and Ravens Nation, #Ravens Flock, actually like these helmets. So we'll keep you updated on Brandon's opinion on that. In the meantime, Dad, rematch of an absolute barn burner. Like, the reason I said go wake up Uncle Al Michaels and tell him the good news hath cometh is because the last time on Dragon Ball Z when we saw these two teams, it was an absolute barn burner. It ended with a missed field goal in overtime and then a Derrick Henry run to help seal the deal and set up the game winner for the Baltimore Ravens. Both quarterbacks going off and throwing for a ton of yards. So, Dad, we know this is a matchup of the two of the best offenses in the league, and quite honestly, two defenses that are somewhat middle of the pack statistically. So, who do you think wins this one, and what are you most excited to watch tonight?
Yeah, you say barn burner, great game. I say, as a former defensive player, 41-38 in overtime. Oh, my God. I mean, talk about both defenses not wanting to see the film the next day. It's just a horrific game on the defensive side of the ball. But Lamar threw 4 touchdowns, Burrow threw 5 touchdowns, both 350 yards or more basically passing. I think Lamar was 348. And you mentioned Derrick Henry's big run. Now, you have Isaiah Likely out in this game. T. Higgins is doubtful in this game to be played tonight. I still lean toward Baltimore because their offense is just hitting on all cylinders, especially running the ball. Cincinnati, I think, is like 18th or 19th in the league against a run, giving up 130 yards. And in that first game, Baltimore had 170-some yards rushing. They're just running the ball so well. Lamar is your MVP at this point. He leads the league in rating, tied for second with Joe Burrow, by the way, in touchdown passes with 20, behind Baker Mayfield with 23. I still love that.
Yeah.
But add the fact that Lamar is also the 17th best rusher in the NFL with 505 yards. And I mean, the weapons that they have, again, Likely is out, but Andrews is obviously becoming that tight end. Again, that Likely took over for him last year for. What worries me is what's worried me all season about Baltimore is their pass defense. They're dead last. They give up 280 yards a game. And by the way, Burrow can throw the friggin' ball. Now, Jamar Chase, his production is going to have to go up because T. Higgins is doubtful, probably not going to play. But look for Mike Gesicki to be big time in this game. He's had 36 targets and 30 receptions, so he's almost money when he's targeted. And Baltimore is in the bottom 5 on covering the tight end. Now, they're, again, in the bottom of a lot of categories against the pass this year. That really is befuddling to me, but that's just where they are. But Gesicki, I would say look for him to have a game because I'm not sure. Maybe they can run the ball better. Cincinnati didn't run the ball well the first game. I think they had 70-some yards, 3 yards a carry. It would be great if Brown could run the ball better and give them a better rushing attack. It's just tough for me to go away from this Baltimore offense right now, which is just hitting, especially in the running game, when you can control the run, and Cincinnati still has trouble stopping the run.
Yeah, Dad, to underscore just how good the Ravens offense is. Because remember last year, the Ravens defense was the story of the league. Lamar Jackson won the MVP, but the statistics didn't pop in a way that made that an easy sell for a lot of people. There was the heavy debate about, hey, does Lamar Jackson have the stats to back up the tape that we've seen, which is exemplary enough to win the MVP? And the answer ended up being yes, thankfully. But in terms of the numbers they're putting up this year, while the defense was on an historic pace last year, the Ravens are the third team in NFL history to score 20 or more points and record 375-plus yards of total offense in each of their first 9 games this season. The other two are the 2000 Rams and the 2013 Denver Broncos. I mean, just insane God-tier company in terms of offensive numbers. So Lamar Jackson and the Ravens are essentially the greatest show on turf so far this season and show no signs of slowing down. And, Dad, I'm with you. I think in this game, they're 6-point favorites now, which might be a little rich for my blood given how good this Bengals offense is. And especially to your point, they can attack the weak point of Baltimore, which is still the secondary of that team. They're a team that is 22nd in quarterback pressure rate, so they don't get to the quarterback fast enough, and they get carved up in the secondary. The Cincinnati Bengals, though, pretty similar, like these teams overall in terms of total yards allowed per game. The Bengals are 19th, the Ravens are 21st. The difference is the Ravens do it by allowing 280 passing yards per game through the air, while the Bengals do it allowing 130 yards per game rushing on the ground. So they're a middle-of-the-pack run defense going up against an historically great. Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry are of the top of the qualified rushers, 2 and 3 in the league in yards per carry. They are number 2 and number 3 in the league overall among qualified rushers in yards per carry and live in the same backfield. So I just think eventually they can do too much and hurt this Bengals defense that really is Trey Hendrickson in the pips right now as he leads the NFL in sacks. Dad, we're going to do awards later on, but it is interesting how much Trey Hendrickson would have to do to get legitimate Defensive Player of the Year buzz for a guy that's gone and been great, and that's all he's done since he's been acquired by Cincinnati, but hardly ever seems to get the credit that's associated with it.
Yeah, because the defense has not been that great, but he has. He leads the league with 11 sacks right now. And what a matchup against the former Domer, Ronnie Stanley. Now, Ronnie Stanley early in the season was in the top 5 in pressures given up, or least amount of pressures given up in the top 5. But the last 4 games, he's allowed 21 pressures, and that's tied for the 4th most over that span. And Hendrickson lines up 94% of the time, basically all the time at the defensive right end, which is right over the left tackle, Ronnie Stanley. So if that's just a one-on-one matchup, and Hendrickson gets quick pressure in under 2.5 seconds. He's just one of 3 players, Nick Bosa and Myles Garrett, with 3 games of 4 or more quick pressures. That's pretty good company to be in. You're right. He's in good company with other guys we talk about as NFL defensive MVP candidates, but he never really gets the talk about it. You mention his name and then you move on to somebody else's name, a Myles Garrett, a Max Crosby, TJ Watt. But he's getting the job done now on a defense that still is the weaker part of this Cincinnati team. But that's, the matchup within the matchup. That's a fun one to watch tonight. Hendrickson against Ronnie Stanley, right end against left tackle.
Yeah, we're always going to point you towards the right beef matchup on this show. If we do nothing else, you'll know which big people to watch on your screen in a given night of a game. Dad, one of the other things that we haven't talked about much this week, we talked a little bit about wide receiver drama for the Bears with DJ Moore the other day, walking off the field in the middle of a play with an apparent tweak in their loss this past weekend, the statements made on the radio. The Bengals aren't short on drama here either. You mentioned T. Higgins doubtful for this game right now. Remember last week, now, Zach Taylor has said Jermaine Burton should be up and available for the Cincinnati Bengals this week, but that was after he was a scratch last week, Dad, for disciplinary reasons, and are all these things flying around about him maybe and what went on in that situation. And Jamar Chase, who said his rookie year, he missed some meetings and had some things said. The rookie needs to get his head screwed on right here. This is going to be a real interesting one for them, a guy that they drafted and thought could be an important part of this receiving attack, getting an opportunity after last week where, we saw a lot of sideline images of a frustrated Joe Burrow and someone that might be quickly losing patience with the group around him. And so it's going to be interesting to see how they respond and rebound after that.
Yeah, like I said, I think Gesicki could be big. And Andre Yosheva, again, he has just 15 receptions this year, but he's a big target. He's 6'3", so he may be a guy that gets some extra looks as well, because obviously they're going to try and shut down Jamar Chase. But like other great receivers like Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, Puka, other great receivers, even though you try and shut them down, they find a way to get open. And Jamar Chase is, third in the league, I think, in receptions, first in touchdowns with 7, third in receptions, I think, with 55. By the way, the second leading receiver by receptions in the league is Brock Bowers, a tight end from the Raiders. I mean, dude is just continuing on from his great career at Georgia. And remember going into the draft, I don't mean to sideswipe us here. Going into the draft, there were those that weren't sure Brock Bowers' game would transfer to the NFL.
Yeah.
I mean, how foolish do those people have to feel? So Brock Bowers obviously could be Offensive Rookie of the Year. I would fighting Jaden Daniels for that. But back to Jamar Chase. He's the man, and he finds a way to get open, but others are going to have to step up.
So big picture right now for both of these teams as we start to, we're going to do our official sort of halfway point look at the NFL awards coming up. We can also start to peek ahead at the playoff picture now, Dad. In the AFC, we know the Pittsburgh Steelers, the current leaders in the AFC North, so they've got the 3 seed right now in the AFC playoff picture. Baltimore sitting at the 5 seed as that first wild card team. And then the Bengals lurking. The AFC is sort of a jumbled mess from like 5 down to really 9 where the Bengals are. You could even throw the Jets in there at 10 where, hey, you've got the Los Angeles Chargers and the Denver Broncos in the last 2 wild card spots, both with 5 wins, and then the 4-win Colts behind them, the 4-win Bengals, and the 3-win Jets there. So there's still a lot on the table towards the end of the season. And Joe Burrow's having the kind of year production-wise, Dad, where he could sort of Josh Allen this team to victory the way that we watched Josh do the back half of last season despite the Bengals' slow start. Do you agree or no?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I agree. They have the firepower on offense to make a move. And the AFC is as you said, is muddied after the first couple of top spots. It's definitely muddied and can go a few ways. And you look at the muddied teams, and I would trust a Cincinnati over the Jets. The Chargers, though, they're having a year, but because their defense is really stepping up, or for Cincinnati it's the offense. But it would not surprise me at all if Cincinnati made a run.
Justin Herbert is playing some ball. He just still doesn't really have anyone to throw said ball to.
No.
But Joe Burrow, Super Saiyan Joe right now, might be losing the gold hair finally, but keeping all of the same powers here. Maybe more Mystic Gohan, but we can get to that next time on Dragon Ball Z. Coming up next, though, we mentioned the pseudo halfway mark since the NFL changed the schedule and the math. We'll put our hand up and tell you which awards preseason we got wrong and who looks like they're in pole position to take home some hardware based on their 2024 performance next.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We're at the midpoint of the NFL season. At least I think it's the midpoint because of the extra game, the math ain't mathin'. I don't know, math isn't my strong suit anyway. But let's revisit the NFL awards. Okay, so you guys made your picks in the preseason for where we thought we would be, you know, at the end of the year. And here's where we are at this point. Okay, we're going to go back and look at some of these because obviously we love to do that and hold you guys accountable. So let's start with the offensive rookie of the year here. GoJo, you went with Marvin Harrison Jr., He's currently plus 4,000. And senior, you went with Jaden Daniels, okay, minus 1,400. He's the current leader. Snaps for senior.
Woo!
Yeah, that one's
right.
Worked out better than I could have ever possibly expected because, Dad, before the season, we were all so Bears focused. I don't know if we, again, when we tried to put together and re-engineer what worked so well for the Houston Texans, I don't know if we imagined that Dan Quinn, especially as his half of that tandem in Washington, would be able to help lift this team. But you've seen the way that team's responded. So much of this certainly goes to coaching for him and Cliff Kingsbury and what they've been able to do molding not only the quarterback, but the team.
Yeah, I mean, listen, as far as Jaden Daniels, hasn't thrown for a ton of touchdowns, 9 touchdowns, but just 2 interceptions, not turning the ball over, much like C.J. Stroud last year, not turning the ball over. He's leading an offense that's third in the league in points scored at over 29 points a game. And, oh, by the way, I mentioned Lamar Jackson being in the top 20 in rushing. Well, Jaden Daniels is 25th as a rusher in the NFL with 459 yards. Now, that's also what got him hurt. It got hurt on a run when he got tackled, but this is a guy who rushed for over 1,000 yards last year when he was at LSU. So we know he can run, but he's efficient. He's very efficient, doesn't turn the ball over, 71% completion percentage. And so I think he is definitely the current leader in the clubhouse for Offensive Rookie of the Year. Somebody pull up the odds for me because I can't. Where is Brock Bowers? All we have are the quarterbacks. Listen, Brock Bowers is the second leading
plus
receiver.
4,000. He's plus 4,000.
He's the second leading receiver in the NFL. I mean, he should be right behind Jaden Daniels. He should be ahead of Bo Nix, ahead of Caleb Williams, ahead of Drake May. I mean, Brock Bowers is having a year, and he's it for that offense, and the defenses know it. You know, they know he is the guy. So, I mean, I don't know how he is not the second favorite in Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, I would just imagine that's people ignoring the Raiders or using their failings against him, but I'm with you. That's rose blooming from the concrete status for Brock Bowers, and he deserves a lot more respect than he's getting. Now, we always know this is going to skew in favor of quarterbacks, so it's no surprise that quarterbacks are in the top 4 of the voting for that. You know, Drake May and what he's done in a much more limited sample size, Bo Nix being the day one starter like Caleb Williams. But I'm with you. This is Jaden Daniels to lose overwhelmingly. He's been incredible so far this season. But Brock Bowers, justice for Brock as he goes out there and dominates on his team. Marvin Harrison Jr. has been fine. I mean, Trey McBride's still the leading receiver on that Arizona Cardinals team. The star turn he was a part of last year seems to only be continuing this season with Kyler Murray, as there was some interesting stuff to get started there. So, obviously, a whiff by me, a win for Dad there. Jesse, let's keep it moving and see if we did any better with the defensive rookies.
Yeah, you guys didn't, neither of you whiffed on this one. Okay, both your guys are on the list here per DraftKings. Senior, once again, has a little bit of an edge in this one, though.
Yeah, so Dad went with Liatu Latu, the rookie pass rusher for the Indianapolis Colts. I went Byron Murphy, the rookie D tackle for the Seattle Seahawks, who right now fading back a little bit. Byron Murphy at plus 2,000 behind Evan Williams, Tyke Smith, who had a big week this last week against Travis Kelce. But Dad, Liatu Latu trailing Jared Verse, who seems to be running away with this a little bit. He's the only one in minus money on this group and has been a part of a Rams team that, Dad, we know and have documented they went from the F them picks Rams when they won the Super Super Bowl to now a team that's really nailed young draft picks. And I wish we could, Braden Fisk, who's in 4th in the odds for Defensive Rookie of the Year, I wish that we could like Mean Girls this thing and have them break up the award and share it together, because hear anyone talk about these guys and getting two guys that had that time under task together and work so well together. Braden Fisk had a couple of sacks in their last game and really seems to be a part of a great young core that they're building now in Los Angeles that could be great for years.
Yeah, I think Jared Verse is definitely the man right now at this point. Watch out for Quinyon Mitchell, the cornerback for the Eagles, right? He's tied or leads the team in passes defensed. He's the 5th leading tackler on the team as well. And in 283 coverage snaps without allowing a TD. So you don't get recognized as much as a cornerback if you don't have, obviously, the interceptions, right? Because you look at the D lineman, like we're looking at with Verse, has 3.5 sacks, has 33 total tackles. The measuring stick for cornerbacks is interceptions, and he doesn't have any. But as a rookie, he is really, really playing well.
I tell you what, we talked about teams hitting on young picks in the same position group. We mentioned Jared Verse and Braden Fisk, both in the top 4 of Defensive Rookie of the Year odds on the sportsbook right now. Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean are both in the top 8 right now. The Eagles' other rookie cornerback pick out of Iowa, who didn't get to play at the beginning, started the year off injured, but has come on late and looked really good. So for Philadelphia, for Vic Fangio in that room, he's got a couple of really good young guys in the secondary, an area that we know was a dire need for Philadelphia coming into this season, and another one that they seem to have addressed in a way that's going to help them, not just this season, but well beyond that. So awesome stuff from those two guys. Jesse, let's go to the one nearest and dearest to Dad's heart, Defensive Player of the Year, where once again it looks like both the swing and the miss and continued disrespect for the man that's currently in the lead.
Yeah, the man currently in the lead, TJ Watt at -135. So, Gojo, you went with Myles Garrett. He's sitting at +4,000 senior. You went with Max Crosby, who's sitting at +2,000, but at least he's in the top 10, okay?
Yeah. They both who was it? Max Crosby and TJ Watt both have 6.5 sacks. Trey Hendrickson leads with 11. He has a 2-sack lead on a guy who, now, again, Cincinnati, well, they're below 500 trying to make a run. There's the guy that maybe should get some love in this is on a team that isn't very good. But Dexter Lawrence, we look at the sacks, right? And you're looking at edge rushers, Trey Hendrickson, Will McDonald, Aiden Hutchinson, who's out, Will Anderson, Kyle Van Noy, Myles Garrett, Grenard, Dante Fowler, TJ Watt, Max Crosby. Sitting at 2nd in the league is defensive tackle, interior D lineman Dexter Lawrence with 9 sacks. Dude is having a monster year. He's not going to get the award. He's not going to get rewarded for it, but I'm going to show as a former interior D lineman, I'm going to show that he is just wreaking havoc in the middle of that D line.
One of the most unique athletes in the NFL. So insane. When you look at the Giants' defensive line that we've talked about, that front 4 and the job they've done this year, when you have Kayvon Thibodeau healthy, Brian Burns, who they brought over in the trade with Carolina, and Dexter Lawrence in the center of all this. Dad, he's the one drawing double teams on this one because you cannot physically ask one person to stop this guy. He's a freight train from hell.
He's 6'4", 340, and he moves, and it should be illegal the way he moves. I mean, it's a scary, scary sight for offensive linemen. And he gets pressure in the way that quarterbacks hate the most, straight up the pocket, straight in the face of the quarterback. This big lumbering giant is just doing a great job. Again, he's not going, unless he just goes nuts in sacks and leads the league in sacks, he's not going to get the love I think that he deserves.
No, he's not. And that's a travesty, a sham, and a mockery. It's a Travis-sham mockery. This guy, and by the way, this is always like, this is one of those, it's like, did you know that Ryan Fitzpatrick had a perfect SAT or a perfect Wonderlic score? Or did you know that Clayton Kershaw and Matthew Stafford played in the same football team growing up? The idea that Dexter Lawrence and Christian Wilkins were allowed to be on the same defensive line in college when they were at Clemson, and rush against college players is one of the scariest things I think about. It keeps me up at night. Jesse, let's move on to one of the other big ones, Offensive Player of the Year, which also, we seem like we could get Offensive Player of the Year and MVP on the same team this year.
Yeah, so Gojo, you did Garrett Wilson. He's sitting at plus 15,000, it looks like. Is that right? Yeah, plus 15,000. Yeah. Senior, you went CD Lamb. He has shorter odds at plus 4,000. Still neither of them sitting near the top.
Yeah, King Henry, Dad, running away with this one right now, pun fully intended. And look at God, in the year of 2024, to see now granted, I understand Offensive Player of the Year tends to be like MVP for the non-quarterbacks, and so two running backs being at the top. But again, with all the conversation around running back, to see Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry so far outpacing Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and the quarterbacks on this list does warm my heart a little bit as we've talked about the sensational value they've brought to both these teams.
And when you start to get into colder weather games, the running game becomes even more important. I'm so happy for the running back position, which has just been decimated monetarily, just worth only more than the kickers. How to get their value back. And here's two guys that are helping that. Derrick Henry is 30. Saquon Barkley is 27. Derrick Henry leads the league in touches, in rushing attempts as well, like he has the last 4 of the last 5 years. These two guys have been the best pickups in the offseason, without a doubt. I still wait to now, again, you could say the MVP and the offensive MVP on the same team, kind of like we saw rookies of the year in Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner, both with the Jets. Justin Jefferson, I would hold out and say he may make a run at this. The dude is that good. He still may make a run. Even Jamar Chase may make a run because he leads in touchdowns. But I love that the two running backs are out front in this.
Derrick Henry leads the NFL in carries, rush yards, rushing touchdowns, and is just behind Jahmyr Gibbs in yards per carry. Jahmyr Gibbs has 6.4. Derrick Henry has 6.3. Only 5 players in NFL history have led the NFL in all core categories in the season. Jim Brown, Leroy Kelly, O.J. Simpson, Walter Payton, and Earl Campbell. So gold jacket Derrick Henry certainly in rare company potentially for the season he's having. Jesse, let's get through these last couple here pretty quickly. Let's look at Coach of the Year.
Yeah, Coach of the Year. So, Gojo, you went with Kevin O'Connell. He's at plus 500 right now. Senior, you went with Matt Eberflus. So it was a good idea months ago, but here we are.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dan Quinn, the leader, plus 180.
Yeah, Mike's is a good one.
Yeah, Mike's had a good one.
Yours is a good one, but Dan Quinn is leading now, right? It has to be
plus
Dan
180.
Quinn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for Dan Quinn, too, having to come over and do this all in year one, up the degree of difficulty of the job they've done with a rookie. And I think we are all, Kevin O'Connell now has a couple of years of showing us, hey, he's a really good coach for the Vikings. Dan Quinn's walked into an organization that not only has struggled to have consistent success on the football field for a while, but dealing with the Dan Snyder era and all of the bad vibes in that building. It's felt like an exorcism that Dan Quinn has performed.
And watch out for Jim Harbaugh. What he's doing with the Chargers,
Man.
We all thought he'd be a year or two away, but he's got them playing some ball.
I saw Alex Smith did an interview with Jim Harbaugh on Sunday NFL Countdown. He had played for him in San Francisco and has this relationship with him. And even talking to a guy he knows really well, Jim Harbaugh can only speak in coaching cliches and the kind of lines that go on the sign on a wall. It's fascinating for him. And we'll briefly touch on, because we've mentioned it so much here, NFL MVP. Dad went with Patrick Mahomes before the season. I went with Dak Prescott. Obviously, Dak Prescott's got his hamstring so partially torn off the bone, my dad starts thinking of ribs. And Mahomes is, listen, Dad, going to have his day in court. He's third in the odds right now behind Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, who we both said Lamar Jackson is far outpacing his MVP pace stats from his previous MVP season, so unsurprisingly in the driver's seat now.
In no disrespect to Josh Allen, I'm surprised the odds are as close. Lamar's plus 280, Josh is plus 300. This isn't disrespect to Josh Allen. This is how well Lamar Jackson is playing. I just think he is head and shoulders above everybody else. Again, it's not just the 20 touchdowns tied for second He's in the teens as far as rushing, of where he ranks in rushing as well, and just how he is leading this team. I just think he is with head and shoulders above everybody else right now for the MVP.
He's seeing the matrix in zeros and ones right now, leads all qualified quarterbacks in pass yards per attempt, touchdown to interception ratio, passer rating, offensive yards, and rushing yards in 2024. I think that's pretty good. Coming up next, we'll talk to someone who knows a thing or two about coaching some ballers here. And check in with Brian Kelly, the LSU head coach, at the top of the next hour. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Before we get to our interview with former Notre Dame head coach, current LSU head coach Brian Kelly, it's time for Better Yet as we look ahead to Thursday night football. Better Yet is presented by Larceny Wheated Bourbon. Lock in a win and seize tonight. Bardstown, Kentucky, 46% alcohol by volume. Think wisely, drink wisely. We've got the Ravens as 6-point favorites in this game at home against the Bengals. A little rich for my blood. I think they win. I think the Bengals can cover given how well that offense is played. But let's look at the props. Joe Burrow's over-under passing yards set at 272.5. Too high for me, but I love Lamar Jackson over 233.5. I really like Lamar Jackson over 49.5 rushing yards, and I like a Ravens win on Thursday Night Football. All right, big game this weekend in the world of college football. Excited to head out and talk to my former head coach and now current LSU head football coach, Brian Kelly, kind enough to give us some time this morning. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. You guys are doing incredible work with your show, and it's about time that I got an invite to get on this show. I know, the Kelseys had me on a year ago. I mean, I coached you for crying out loud, and finally I get the invite. So thank you. It must be a good week for football.
Yeah, Coach, I mean, did you ever anticipate that there would be another interior offensive lineman you played for that would have the biggest platform? Jason Kelce now, maybe the most famous center in the history of football. Go figure.
Well, I'll tell you what, it just tells you how bad of a coach I am that I drove both you guys into the media business. I mean, if I could coach a lick, you'd still be playing, but you guys are doing quite well. So despite me, you guys are very successful.
I think you're doing all right for yourself, winning as coach in Notre Dame history and trying to lead an LSU team to, boy, what a big game this week against Alabama. And, normally you had a tough game, a tough loss against A&M a couple weeks ago, and then had a bye. And normally you forget about a loss quickly and move on to the next game. But you had a bye. So how long did you guys hang on or talk about that game before turning the page?
Yeah, I think Mike knows about this. We usually had this 24-hour rule, right? You kind of let it, a win, you enjoy for 24. The loss, it kind of sticks around a little bit longer than 24 hours. And that one in particular, because, we had good game control at halftime at 17-7, and then we turned the ball over 3 times and then did not adjust after knocking their quarterback out of the game. We didn't adjust to a running quarterback. And all that is disappointing because a lot of that, is coaching as well. We didn't do a good enough job coaching, and certainly we didn't execute well enough. So that kind of lingers a little bit longer. But once we got through that funk, we were able to focus back on, what's really important is that we need to get better. We've got to take care of the football. We got to get Garrett a little bit more balance in the offense. Defensively, we've got to be ready for Milroe, who's going to run as a quarterback. So I think once we got past that, it was easier to start to focus on the things we needed to get better at as a football team.
Yeah, having that second bye week before this game, a great opportunity. What is the message and what has it been as it pertains to defending the running quarterback? I know you were very vocal about that after that Texas A&M game. So what have you guys done getting ready to face Jalen Milroe, a guy who can certainly hurt you in that aspect?
Well, we've faced, the running quarterbacks, right? The South Carolina running quarterback certainly is an outstanding quarterback. We've had those looks before, so it's not new. Arkansas has got a running quarterback. So those systems are in place. It's the matter of executing them well. And we just went back to work on our systems of how to do that effectively, play in and play out, one play at a time. And so just double down on our process, double down on the preparation, physically, mentally, tactically, technically, and just went back to work because that's really what you have to do in those kinds of situations. And I think our guys did a really good job. They're excited about this challenge in playing Alabama. We're playing at Tiger Stadium. It's a place that's been very, very good to us. But look, at the end of the day, you got to play well for places to be good to you. Crowds are going to be great when your team's playing well. So we've got to execute well, but I know our guys are excited about the challenge.
How much of the bye week was set to self-scouting as opposed to preparing for Alabama?
Yeah, good question. The first bye week, now we're on 2 this year. The first one was a lot more football related, self-scouting, looking at tendencies, things that maybe we could do better from a tactical standpoint. The second one, we really focused on recovery for our football team and a little bit of recruiting. We got on the road and recruited. So we treated them a little bit differently. It's not that we didn't look at some things, internally, but we did them a little bit differently in terms of using the 2 bye weeks a little bit differently. So this one was much more about recovery and recruiting, and then getting back to our traditional way of, attacking an opponent if we had a normal week of work in season.
Certainly buy going to be big for a guy like Garrett Nussmeier, your quarterback, who's in his first year as a starter. You've worked with a lot of really great quarterbacks over the years. Last year, the Heisman Trophy winner in Jaden Daniels. What have you liked so far about the way that Garrett has developed in season one as a starter for him?
Well, he's been his best when his best is needed. He stumbled against A&M with some decision making, but I made it pretty public. I think we have to, as coaches, do a better job of giving him more balance within the offense so he doesn't feel like he needs to stand on his head to make a play every time. We throw the ball more than any team in the country right now, and we need to have better balance within the offensive structure. Because he's not a traditional running quarterback, there needs to be a little bit more misdirection within our running game, a little bit more eye candy maybe for the defense. So a lot of this was about, for me, giving him a little bit more weapons relative to the balance in our offense. Now, that doesn't take him off the hook in terms of making good decisions. But by and large, this season's been a really good season for a first-year starter. And I think he's only going to improve on that as the season goes on. His trajectory, I think, is going to be outstanding because he still has another year of eligibility. He hasn't declared he's coming back. I want to make that clear, but he's got another year of eligibility and there's more growth for him. So I think it's been a really good year of development for him.
Coach, you're no stranger to every week is important. Coaching at Notre Dame, with not being in a conference, every game has its importance. Now being in the SEC, every game has its importance. People are putting an elimination game on this game. Two teams with two losses. Two losses can get you in the top 12. Three losses, probably not. Is that the way you're selling it to the players, or the players are smart enough to realize it as well? How is that being talked about?
You know, and Mike knows this, I very rarely talk about wins and losses. It's really about, process and outcome, right? Stick to your process, stick to the things that we do on a day-to-day basis. And then, you're probably going to get the outcomes that you look for. And it's the only way you can do it, really. If you start thinking about those wins and losses and elimination games, those are distractions. They don't help you, from a execution standpoint. And so really keeping them focused on what our process is on a day-to-day. And I know that sounds like coach speak, but it's really the only way you can do it. It's the only way you can keep 18 to 22-year-olds focused on what's most important. And what's most important is, their technical, tactical, physical, and mental development each and every week as you go into these kinds of games. Now, do they follow these shows? Absolutely. Do they hear about elimination games? Absolutely. They don't need to hear it from me as well. So I'll keep them focused on what I believe will help them prepare them so they can go and perform and be their best when their best is needed.
Coach, you mentioned some of it there, but I always remembered, and when people ask me about, you getting the job down at LSU, I said you were great at setting the expectation for what we needed to know each and every day in terms of the work that was done. And, whether that was how things are labeled or were talked about, it was always very consistent, and it helps the players a lot. A lot's changed in college football in the decade plus since I was a player for you. As of late, we've seen name, image, and likeness, the transfer portal, all these different things around roster construction and play style. So I'm curious, has there been a part of your process that you've had to change and fine tune over the last decade or so that's helping you coach this team better now?
Well, I think it's, being much more transparent and communicating more effectively on a day-to-day basis, because there are so many distractions out there. And you just mentioned a couple of them, right? The transfer portal and NIL, and talking about playing time and talking about your 4 games and talking about redshirting. I think all that has to be transparent and communicated on a day-to-day basis. So I just think there has to be more one-on-one communication and more availability of me, the head coach, with the players on a day-to-day basis, and having more of a relationship with your players every single day. As you know, I was still involved in the offense almost every single day at Notre Dame. You really can't be. I mean, you have to be involved with the players and have those relationships so you can talk about these things, because you have to eliminate confusion. You have to eliminate these distractions so they can focus on being the best they can be.
So, Coach, your career of coaching, you started at Assumption in the Northeast, and Grand Valley State, Central Michigan, Cincinnati, Notre Dame, all in the Midwest. How has it been personally for you going to the South and coaching SEC football, number one, but then in the South?
I even think about that sometimes. And to me, the players that I get to coach are so similar in terms of what their wants and needs are. They want to be the best. They want to be coached. They want to be coached the right way. They want to be motivated the right way. They want to be talked to the right way. They want to be, look, here's what I know. Mediocre players and elite players, they don't get along on any team. And it doesn't matter what team you coach, what part of the country you coach. And so, making sure that, when you talk about the most important principles is creating an environment where high performance is at its core. It's the same. It really is, no matter where you are in the country. And guess what? Those that don't want to be elite, they don't hang around very long. Notre Dame was awesome because anybody that was coming to Notre Dame, had that part of them from an academic standpoint too. So they wanted to be elite and they weren't going anywhere because they wanted to be elite in the classroom, and you were forced to be elite in the classroom because there was no other way to be at Notre Dame. Sometimes at a place like LSU or some other schools in the SEC, you don't have some of those elite classrooms. And that doesn't mean they're not great institutions, but you have to make sure that when these guys come here, it's about elite in everything we do, in the classroom, on the football field, in the community. And sometimes that's not what they want. They just want football. And it eliminates some of those guys in my programs.
And also in the community down there, it's food, which can certainly put weight on you. You look great. You've been able to not succumb to the South eating and weight gain.
I love being around the players. I love coaching them. So, I said, the 30 pounds that I lost was going to give me another few years in the business. And I can't do the media stuff the way you guys can. So I know I would never get a job. So I figured I'd try to hold on to this job as long as I could.
Well, listen, that's a perfect segue into what I wanted to ask you about. Dad talked about your history, your track record, a guy that you spent a lot of time facing off with when he was at the helm at Alabama, Nick Saban, now in the media here, but you're going into an Alabama LSU game without Nick Saban at the helm for that other team. How different does that feel now, trying to prepare for what a Kalen DeBoer coached Alabama team is going to afford you that might be different than what Nick was?
Yeah, I mean, look, Kalen DeBoer is an outstanding football coach, and his signature is on the team. There's different coordinators, right? There's a different flavor. But look, Nick's got an office at Alabama still. I mean, he recruited virtually this entire team. His footprints or fingerprints or whatever you want to call it are still all over this football team. And so, that still will remain the case here for a number of years. The expectations, the standards, he set them there, and Kalen will live up to them. He's an outstanding football coach, but Nick's shadow is still there. Kalen probably feels it a little bit, and that's fine, because he took the job knowing that was probably the case. But Nick will be here Friday. We've invited him to practice. I love Nick. We go way back, but I always use the phrase around him: keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer.
There you go. Well, he will be close on both sides here in the middle of the action for what will be the game of the weekend, Alabama at LSU, for an awesome atmosphere in college football. Coach, we apologize it took so long to get you on here. We'll make sure that the return trip is a lot sooner. Thanks for the time today.
Good to see you guys. Take care.
Dad, you and I have both gotten to head down to Death Valley, actually for the Alabama LSU game years ago, and there's a lot of loud places I've been in college football. None of them touched the Eras Tour Night 2 in Los Angeles, but Death Valley at night is pretty close to that, especially when Alabama rolls into town.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a great place to watch a game, and what a game. Again, we get, in week 10 or whatever, we get an elimination game from the expanded playoffs. You can't ask for much more than that.
One of many important games down the stretch. Coming up next, we'll highlight some of the must-watch games that'll determine the playoff down the stretch of this college football season. All right, our thanks to Brian Kelly for stopping by ahead of Bama LSU this weekend. We will get to some of the other games that we think will have the biggest impact on the college football playoff down the home stretch of the season in just a second. But we got breaking NFL news here, guys, into GoJo and Golic. It happened again. The Pope tweeted about the New Orleans Saints. Now, some people would say that maybe this is by accident. We know this had happened last week. When you use the hashtag for any of the NFL teams on Twitter, their team logo will pop up. The Pope obviously won to tweet about Saints. Had this happened, we think mistakenly last week. Twice cannot be an accident, Dad. I'm calling shenanigans on this and saying the Pope or whoever runs his social media at the Vatican is now leaning into the bit. We cannot become hashtag Saints with a frown. We must have joyful hearts and that remain open to hope. Now, this comes in the wake of the New Orleans Saints firing Dennis Allen and naming an interim coach. So do you think he's in on the bit at this point, Dad?
Oh, absolutely he's in on the bit. Of course he's not in on the bit, but for the sake of the show, yes, he's in on the bit. You can't become the Saints with a frown. Hashtag Saints with a frown. I mean, I would love to think he's in on the bit, or whoever is controlling his social media. But do we really think in Vatican City that they're familiar with the Saints, the NFL? I mean again, I would like to think so.
His social media team might be senior. The original tweet where he did the Saints thing on November 5th, 9.8 million views compared to they're hitting like under 300,000 on their other tweets. Then they're like, okay, maybe bring it back. They bring it back 1.1 million on the accidental one today. So I don't know. The Catholic Church has a PR problem. Maybe they're trying to expand their reach the youth of America.
See, lean into the bit at this point is the best that anyone leaning into a good bit. Always great advice, but especially here, as you said, with the background for the Catholic Church, Dad. Now, as some people have pointed out in the replies to this, they would really like it if the Pope could do something about the Saints' upcoming salary cap situation next year. Almost $78 million over the cap. Far and away the worst in the NFL. One of the most nightmarish cap situations ever. So if he can come up with answers for that, prayers going up in the name of the Saints trying to once and for all be a grown-up team with the salary cap, which is confirmed real, I think that would go a long way.
Yeah, lay hands on the team somehow. I fluctuate back and forth on this. I would imagine whoever does the social media had to read the responses and see that they were all about the football team, the Saints. So maybe it was about it. I go back and forth,
Dad,
about
now
it.
I know how this ends. I know how this ends. This is all an elaborate rollout for what I'm stunned doesn't already exist. The Pope's going to have a podcast soon. No. Everybody else has a podcast. We just got done with an election cycle where we watched candidates having to go on with people who I never imagined would all of a sudden become the kind of pundits that would influence the outcome of elections. And so for the Pope, we had some interesting replies when I brought up the idea of a papal podcast here. Lord of Jord tweets into us, just invite him on yours and rename it today, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Host. Got a nice ring to it. Obviously, wow. I think a great segment on any podcast involving the Pope could be hashtag Pontifex, where you go through and have him read off interesting and relevant NFL facts for the upcoming weekend. John M. writes in, blessing with the boys. The other one that really did it for me, at Scott D. at Ute and Casper, all the white smoke.
Oh, that is sick.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really good. Those are some good names.
I will say, if you look it up online, okay, the Pope has a communications consultant who does work for the digital stuff, and Bishop Paul Tig, I don't know. He's the one. So there's a group of people that have some control over this. The Pope does not post to his own Twitter account. There's like a group of people, and he signs off on the content. So you got to believe, come on, Senior, the communications consultant, you don't think they saw these numbers and they were like, we got to do this?
Maybe if we dig a little deeper, we can find some of those names on the marketing team that have placed bets on DraftKings for NFL games.
Possibly.
So maybe we could find a connection there, right?
It's possible.
Have the Pope on the podcast for a little game of Vatican or Vaticant for this upcoming NFL weekend and really start to drive home on this. I'm just saying, at Pontifex, call us. We've got ideas, and we think we can help out here, in exchange for a little good word with the big fella, if you know what I'm saying.
What would be your first question to the Pope? What would be your first question to the Pope?
Well, I mean, it depends on if we're going to go like 60 minutes here where we want to drill down on some things that have actually been a problem. But if I'm going to go like more existential,
Yeah,
I don't know. I'd ask her what the
no
coolest
idea.
room is inside the Vatican, because I read enough of the Da Vinci Code back in the day to have a bunch of really grand visions of some wild stuff going on in there. I want to know, do they have like an Area 51 equivalent? Like, does the Pope know about aliens? Are they in communication? Or is he strictly just a hymn to God pipeline here that we're talking about?
I don't think we would dig down. I don't think we want to dig down, and I don't think the Pope would want to dig down too deep into the conversation. I would like to know if there are secret rooms in the Vatican. I would like to know how much the Pope Mobile costs. That's all heavily armored. I mean, so some good questions.
This is always the one I would want to know too, and this is for every Pope, because for these guys, part of the appeal for the podcast would be the Pope can speak so many languages. Usually these guys are fluent in a bunch of different languages. I actually, in high school, fun fact, I committed to Notre Dame while I was on a trip abroad in Italy. I committed to Notre Dame on a brick cell phone outside of the Leaning Tower of Pisa to Charlie Weiss back in the winter of 2007. And while I was over there, we also, being a Catholic school, shout out to Northwest Catholic High School in West Hartford, Connecticut, we got to go to a papal mass. And during the mass, the Pope shouts out the people who are there and kind of cheer in the back. So he shouted out our school, we cheered in the back. But he did it in a bunch of different languages. And I've always wondered, what language does the Pope dream in? I'd imagine it's whatever the native tongue is, but I don't know if after a while that gets bogged down when you know that many languages that you can work in. So what language do you dream in, Mr. Pope, would be the first question that I ask Pontifex.
Probably Latin.
Wow, that's a pretty deep question, actually. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I know. I'm a pretty deep guy, which is why I'm going to follow that question up with this. What do we think the most important college football game is down the stretch of the season that's going to affect the outcome of the college football playoff race? Guys, we got a big one coming up this weekend. We talked about LSU and Alabama, certainly going to go a long way this weekend. And, Dad, a matchup of two very flawed but exciting quarterbacks in this one. Garrett Nussmeier turning the ball over a little bit too much lately. Jalen Milroe got off to the hot start. People thought Heisman. Now people think maybe not fitting in as well with Kalen DeBoer's offense. So this is a good appetizer for the rest of the. Is there another game, as we talked about the playoff races yesterday, some of the teams in the top 12 and what they've got, that you've got your eye on in particular?
I mean, Tennessee at Georgia is another good game, because both teams just have one loss in the conference. Now, obviously, Georgia is favored in this game, and I think will win this game. But that's enough. I mean, you even look at LSU, and LSU has only one loss, even though they have two losses. One was to USC in opening weekend. They only have one conference loss. There's 5 teams with just one conference loss, but 4 play one another. Georgia's playing Tennessee this week. Texas A&M plays Texas the last week of the season. So there's still some clutter to work through. But LSU has an outside chance, because of just one loss in the conference, to be in said SEC championship game. But nonetheless, with Alabama being 11 and LSU being 15, the best thing about this game, because I don't think LSU will get to the SEC title game, is that the winner still has a chance to be in. Alabama's already in the top 12, so if they win, obviously they would stay there. LSU would be interesting if they beat Alabama, who's in the top 12, to see how much they would jump. And if they would get into the top 12, they would hover right toward the bottom of the top 12. But I think those are the two best games this weekend, the two SEC games.
Yeah, I think for LSU, you're right. Being in striking distance is really all you need to be. Now, we know the danger of being on the back end of the 12-team playoff in a day and age where if there's any slip up with Boise State or anything weird happens there, now all of a sudden you're at risk of getting jumped by the highest ranked group of 5 champion if you are ranked inside the top 12. As again, we reinforce, because this is new for everybody, the 5 highest ranked conference champions get automatic bids into the college football playoff field of 12. And so while Boise State currently ranked 12 and inside that field, if they were 14, 15, 20th, but the highest ranked group of 5 champion, they would bump whoever the 12 seed was, the 12th ranked team in the tournament, and away that we would go. So confusion there that will get worked out. Dad, I would offer this up, because you mentioned those, and Tennessee, Georgia is going to be a fascinating styles make fights. 2 great defenses in the SEC, and a quarterback in Carson Beck who has turned the ball over too much for a Georgia offense that's been flawed. And on the other side, Nico Iamaleava has all of a sudden, I think, slowed down from a pace at the beginning of the season that had people thinking Heisman. It hasn't quite been exactly the Hendon Hooker version of the offense that people were expecting for him.
No, I agree. You're talking the 4 quarterbacks, 3 were in the preseason Heisman talk, right? Milroe, Nussmeier, and Beck. And they all have kind of fallen off. And Iamaleava, he started out hot and has cooled off. So the quarterbacks, the 4 quarterbacks in these games have suddenly have questions, especially Beck. I mean, multiple games with multiple interceptions. Well, so now all of a sudden the quarterback position has become a little bit of a question mark for these teams.
And I just want to make abundantly clear, we're talking about this Georgia game down the road. They've still got to get through Ole Miss on the road at the Grove this weekend. They're the noon they're the 12:30 Pacific, so I guess 3:30 SEC game of the week there on ABC with ESPN. They've got Tennessee the following week, though, so back-to-back tough weeks for Georgia. I want to throw out, Dad, 2 games that came up the other day as we were talking about the future of this season. One makes a lot of sense. In Indiana and Ohio State, I am fascinated because everyone's wanted to dog on Indiana's strength of schedule as they've gone and baptized opponents in year 1 with Kurt Cignetti at the helm. And so Ohio State is going to be that test for them. People are finally going to get to grade them against an opponent that, hey, Ohio State's roster might not look $20 million of roster right now, but it's at the very least as good as the team last year that had a chance to be in a playoff contender and a Big Ten contender. So that one I'm very excited about just because the IU story has been fascinating to me. The other one is the one that you brought up in the Big 12 race. And that's Iowa State against Kansas State in the last week of the season. Because, again, we're assuming everyone goes chalk and can win up until that point. If they lose, now all of a sudden they're the one that lets Colorado into the Big 12 championship if that Iowa State team drops one and loses to Kansas State at the end of the year. So that, to me, becomes the most fascinating one, giving them a realistic chance and a realistic map towards the playoff after all the conversation we've had around Colorado the last couple of seasons.
I as I said the other day, I'm amazed how much we talked about Colorado last year and they were a bad team, and how little we're talking about Colorado this year and they're a good team. I mean, they are legitimately a good team, sitting at 6-2 overall, obviously already bowl eligible, but they have, I'm sure, higher goals than that. Now, again, they don't control their own destiny to the Big 12 title game. They need Iowa State to lose a game, which certainly could happen. Iowa State has not been looking great in a number of their games. So that would be a story. Could you imagine Colorado ranked 20th? Obviously, they would move up before the conference championship game if they were in it. That Colorado would have a chance to be one of the high seeds in the college playoff system. That would be amazing.
Just underscoring how ridiculous the Big 12 has been this year. As you mentioned, Iowa State lost last week and Kansas State lost last week. And so now in the poll, you've got BYU leading the conference undefeated at 9th that we talked about at nauseum yesterday. Iowa State's at 17th. Kansas State, who beat Colorado a few weeks ago, at 19th. And then the Buffs at 20 right behind them. But as we know in the Big 12 standings, because Kansas State lost again this weekend, Colorado is now above them in the standings, which is why if Iowa State loses, has 2 losses in the conference, and Colorado can win out, they've got a path to the Big 12 championship game. And for Colorado, Dad, at Texas Tech coming up this weekend, which is a big one, and then home versus a Utah team that's been a shell of themselves, on the road against Kansas, and home versus Oklahoma State. So very winnable games the way Colorado has played football this season. that could give them an opportunity. And all of a sudden, Deion Sanders, who has been the subject of attention, might actually get it again for what the work he's done on the field, turning this team into a legitimate contender this season. Coming up next, let's take a look at the NBA and the surprise team that our very own Amin El-Hassan called out before the season, delivering big last night.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr., and Mike Golic Sr. here with you guys today on a Thursday. So we had some tantalizing matchups in the NBA last night. Celtics-Warriors clash. Was it a revenge game? Jason Tatum says no. But Warriors getting the W, improving to 7-1. Undefeated on the road. Are you guys surprised by this strong start from the Warriors?
I mean, to some extent, yes. And I know we talked to Amin El-Hassan from Oddball before the season, and he was the one that circled the Warriors and said, watch out, this team has added some pieces that can work really well. And one in particular that he shouted out to add, because again, these weren't marquee moves. These weren't ones that were going to register on the big three reorg style team shifting moves that we've seen in the past. But Buddy Hield, now the second leading scorer on this team, as the Splash Brothers have finally broken up and Klay Thompson's in Dallas, Buddy Hield has stepped into that role. And last night, another great night for him from beyond the arc, and a guy that spaced the floor continually with Steph Curry in a way that right now has them as a team with arguably the best bench in the NBA through the first 7-8 games of the season. Their offensive, I think the team that's number one in net rating. Offensively, they're near the top of the league. Defensively, they're top three. So, Dad, this has sort of been a throwback, injecting a lot of youth around Steph Curry as they continue to reinvent this franchise.
Yeah, Buddy Hield has been a great find for them. Him and Steph Curry last night, 8 of 16 between the two of them from three-point land, shooting 50% from there. So I have to admit I'm surprised. And not just because, well, they lost, part of the big three in Klay Thompson, because Klay had started to kind of waver a little bit. Just didn't think they had added much, but Hield obviously has been a big addition. So I'm surprised, and especially this win on the road, right? as well. I having them 7-1, I am surprised. Now, Steph has already turned an ankle, has an ankle issue. We'll see going forward, what that does for the entire season. Again, it's a long season. A lot of the players, and especially the older players, will go through some sort of injury bug, maybe except for LeBron. The dude is in unbelievable shape. But we know the guys that miss time with injury. But color me as surprised on Golden State, and I don't know of how many people saw this coming out of the gate.
No, again, this has been one of the early surprises of the season. Yeah, no, Golden State, number 1 in net rating right now in the NBA, goes on the road and does that to the Boston Celtics. Now, we know styles make fights. We know for Boston, in terms of looking far down the road here, you still don't have Kristaps Porzingis back and probably won't until December. We know styles also make fights in the Western Conference, where bigs have been the flavor of last year's postseason out in that conference, and will they be able to match up personnel-wise in that way? The Golden State Warriors, when you look at who they've got on the interior there, I'm not sure what the answer is. But right now, Dad, especially as everyone is measured against the Boston Celtics, being able to go out and punch them in the mouth in TD Garden, huge move for them and a very fun one to watch last night. Another interesting one last night. Always love a good revenge game, and I don't know if, again, there should have been much bad blood here, but Jesse, Paul George got an interesting reception when he went back to Los Angeles. Now going and playing in a place in the Intuit Dome he never got to play while he was a member of the Clippers, as his 76ers get baptized by them. But Boo Bird's out a little bit for Paul George in a way he didn't love.
Yeah, that was weird. I mean, they left on odd terms, but both sides said, it was just business. So yeah, got booed there, and then the Clippers handled business 110-98. Were you surprised by that?
It doesn't matter how a player leaves. It doesn't matter how a player leaves. A player is going to get booed when they go back. Saquon Barkley, left. Basically the Giants didn't even, barely offered him anything, and he leaves and goes to Philadelphia, and there were a smattering of boos when he got on the field. It doesn't matter how you leave a team; you're going to be booed when you go back to that stadium or that arena.
I disagree. I think there's one caveat here, which is if you leave when you're not that good anymore. Like, that's going to be Klay Thompson whenever he goes back to Golden State. I forget if he has already or not. He's going to get a fine reception because people around there were waiting for the end of that. They understood it had run his course there. He's going to be fine. When you leave on the fans' terms, that's fine. When they've decided you're no longer a good enough player to where they'll miss you, yeah, they'll cheer you. And they did the video, like the Clippers did right by Paul George last night. They did the thank you video for him and showed him love. And I know he had talked on his podcast, Dad, about the nature of the negotiations that led to him leaving, where he said, I would have played and stayed on the same deal they signed Kawhi to, but when we talked about that during the season, and that was before Kawhi ended up injured, Paul George ended up having to shoulder a bunch of the load, and he decided, no, the price went up and things changed a little bit. He squashed that in this week leading up to the game and said, hey, me, the brass, and the Clippers, we're cool. They did right by me there. It's just business. But Paul George pointing out, Dad, that, hey, I left in free agency, so it's not like I demanded a trade or anything, which, to be fair, is kind of the line of demarcation we draw in the NBA, right? It's always been the differentiator for LeBron, who's moved teams but has never leveraged his way out the way someone like James Harden has. I do still think there's an element to, yeah, well, you had a choice. You were a free agent, and you chose not them. So I can actually understand the fans busting out the boo birds for this one.
November 12th, Dallas will be at Golden State. We'll test your theory. I still think you'll hear some boos. I just think you will hear some boos.
There is no way they're going to boo. Whatever you want. I want, you know what? If are you willing to bet your hair? Because I want your hair.
What is that? What is going after my hair?
If they don't boo Klay Thompson when he comes back, you've got to get a buzz cut.
That's that. By the way, that's the in-season tournament. That's an in-season tournament game. No, I'm not getting a buzz cut.
Coward.
So you're leaking confidence already. Coward.
Do it, senior. You won't.
Wait. What are you going to do? Wear a wig?
I can if you want. You can name the turns. It's not my job to think of ways for you to hurt me. You gotta shave. You gotta shave your face.
You know what?
Shave your face.
You know what?
You gotta shave your face.
You know what? 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 You know what
All right.
Ooh.
Yeah. Shave
Naked
your
face.
head, shave your face. Deal?
Oh, listen, look at Jesse brokering the deal.
That's what you're supposed to do. Stir the drink.
Mm-hmm. Do we?
I don't know if I'm that confident.
Oh, there we
Come
go. That's all I
on!
needed. That's all I needed was to break you here, right in front of the nation.
I think he'll get booed.
Oh,
I'm not willing to put my lettuce on the line.
it'll grow back.
But will it grow back
All right.
this luscious, Jesse?
I mean, I don't know.
All right, I'm going to think of something. Maybe we'll get you to shave the beard if he doesn't get booed then there, because I thought before you had all this confidence and bravado, but now all of a sudden it's nut cutting time, and Daddy running scared. Daddy running scared. So, with that being said, Dad, you know what? That kind of effort might get you cussed out by J.J. Redick the way he cussed out the Lakers the other night. How about that one, by the way? John Morant and LeBron jawing back and forth. It's nice to have. If we can keep John Morant on the court, not doing any sort of shenanigans related to guns off the court or anything related to Instagram Live off the court, and just have him there. He's such a fun force of basketball nature. You already had the 360 layup highlight from the other night, and now you've got him out here poking the Lakers and LeBron again in a way that was always the most endearing part about his version of the Grizzlies. The heir apparent to the grindhouse Memphis Grizzlies, where they're not afraid of anybody, and they like going out there and poking and rattling other people and being antagonists. And he did it so much last night that J.J. Redick dog cussed his whole team for not giving effort like their 40-year-old star that had 39 points.
Yeah, 39 points, 6 of 11 from three-point land. I will say this as well. You know, I think the best athletes in the world are basketball players. And we just talked about Saquon Barkley, about his peers, how they were even like just amazed at the backward hurdle that he had on the field. In an NBA where, again, I think they are the best athletes in the world, I think John Morant is that. I think John Morant even drops the jaws of other players in the league with his athletic ability. It's ridiculous. I pray the dude can stay on the court without off-court troubles and injury. Just to be able to stay on the court to see what this team can do. But his athletic ability is on another level. It's unreal.
Yeah, if John Morant just keeps Instagram deleted off his phone, we are going to be treated to some of the most marvelous athletics feats we've ever seen. Coming up next, we'll finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third, including the potato prince himself of the NFL. All right, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, the third. 3 quick stories to send you to the rest of the day. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave the show a 5-star rating, and check us out live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. And if you miss us or our guests, thanks to LSU head football coach Brian Kelly for stopping by at Alabama LSU this weekend. You can check that out wherever you get our podcast or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done with the show. Guys, I've been waiting all week to get to this story in this, so let's start on it right now. The NFL has a potato prince in its midst. Connor McGovern, one of the offensive linemen for the New Orleans Saints, is actually the heir to a massive potato empire. He is now in his, I believe, 8th year in the NFL. He's 12 games into this year. And, Dad, he's coming from a family that's worth over $500 million, as his grandfather, Ron Offit, is at the head of a potato empire that supplies potatoes to McDonald's as well as a number of other fast food restaurants and restaurants of different ilks. And so I got to be honest, he has to be one of the most popular offensive linemen in history, because being able to supply starches and carbs to the rest of your fat friends has to be an incredible gift and bonus when you're palling around with him.
I mean, some would question why the dude is playing. Not just... I mean, obviously he wants to do his own thing.
Tom Condon, his agent, said the biggest knock on him when he was coming out of the draft out of Missouri was people have pointed out that you come from money. And don't get me wrong, like growing up, because we had means, I remember a teammate of mine at Notre Dame when we were working out asked me, why are you doing this? Because you don't need this the same way that everyone else does. And Connor got asked this too, so much so that one of his teammates said when coaches were hard on him in college at Missouri, he would go, "Don't worry, coach. Connor's got potatoes. He'll be fine."
His family's worth an estimated $500 million. So that potato.
My favorite part is his grandfather, Ron Offit, who's the guy that founded the company, is often called the Sultan of Spuds, which is among the better nicknames ever made.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. I thought they'd be worth more than 500 when you're producing for McDonald's fries.
Yeah, but potatoes
not just McDonald's. Wendy's, Raising Cane's, Frito-Lay, Idaho Instant Mashed Potatoes, like they got them all.
Maybe it's just his immediate family. Maybe that's not the empire as a whole.
They must have a lot of overhead. I mean, 500 million seems light for providing. Now again, we're 500 million. People are chuckling, but I wonder, can he get fries anytime he wants? Does he get free fries?
Do you have a special card that you can walk in and flash, and it's like,
gotta be, right? Right?
There's gotta be. Or he's worth so much, he just doesn't mind paying for them. I don't know. It's like going back to his net worth at the end of the day, so.
That is true. It's sort of reinvesting into the family business there. The best part was, so 2016 was when Connor went into the draft, and said his grandfather, Ron Offit, sat him and his dad, Keith, down, who's the president of the company, before the draft, and said, you realize you're walking away from more money in the family business in comparison to going to the NFL. And his dad sort of laughed it off at first and realized, oh no, he's serious and very correct. And so that's the one thing. People always say, hey man, you're rich, why are you doing this? You cannot question Connor McGovern's love for the game if the guy is out here shortening his own neck every Sunday in the NFL, as opposed to just going and collecting potato money for the rest of his life.
But it's also not like he's been ostracized from the earnings. I mean, it's not like when he's done playing, he can't go into the business. It's not like he's been, just cut out of the family will and the business, right? I mean,
this is like when kids take a year off to travel or be like a ski instructor at a resort in Switzerland. Like he's just taking a little vacation.
He took a decade off to shorten his neck.
Yeah.
A gap year in the NFL. This will make for a great Instagram reel before he begins his time at the throne of the empire. I will have to say, at some point, I'd love to try and get Connor McGovern on and ask him, with all his expertise in potatoes, how he ranks the best cut of fries, because we have oft debated this on here and on Twitter, and I would like to hear from an expert on that front. So we will get to that at some point, but for now, let's get to that here, Jesse, with a very famous name deciding to make his commitment to college.
Yeah, Matt Leinert's son. So he is a legend at USC. His son committed to SMU and not his alma mater. So how do you guys feel about this move? Senior, you had your son commit to your alma mater. Is this a thing where like people are questioning this decision?
People always ask me would I have been bummed if Mike, Jake, Sydney all didn't go to Notre Dame, of which they all got scholarships and got to go to Notre Dame. If I would have been bummed. And my thought was I would be happy for them if they're happy wherever they go. And I told them that. Mike was on a visit to Florida when Urban Meyer was coaching Florida, and Jake was down there as well. And that's when I told him, you go wherever you want. If you love another place outside Notre Dame, go to it. It just can't be USC. That's just, I mean, come on. As a Notre Dame grad, you can't be USC. But SMU was actually the first school that offered Matt Leinert's son a deal. When Sonny Dykes was the coach at SMU, it was before the kid's freshman year. And his son this is his third high school he's on well, his junior year going now. But SMU was the first school that he committed to, and he said it's still number one. Now, they have another quarterback in that class, he's in the class of 26. They have a quarterback in the 25 class. We'll see where it all ends up, but it was the first school that offered him, and he's staying with them at this point.
Yeah, so he's a Cole Leiner, by the way. He has a name. Is a 6'3" righty and a junior at California's Redondo Union. Mentioned he started off at Mater Dei, where his dad went, I believe, as well. He's currently not rated by ESPN, but he's got offers from Colorado, Arizona, and Utah. So he's going and joining Rhett Lashley's bunch, which right now, man, SMU in year one in the ACC, absolutely steamrolling through people and looking like one of the best teams in college football. So cool for his dad and social media star Matt Leinart now. He's been one of the guys with Richard Jefferson out here in the South Bay that's sort of taken TikTok by storm. But this is one of those that, like, Dad, and I know how you feel now as the guys that were Matt Leinart, one of the stars of my youth watching college football, now one of the guys whose kids is getting ready to make that transition. So just a reminder, the sands of time coming for us all, and the creeping and encroaching bit of darkness is unrelenting. Jesse, speaking of that, let's get to the third here. Your Halloween costume. Good timing by you getting it into the wire, because apparently Ray Gun's hanging up the cleats.
Yeah, she has decided she will not be competing anymore as a competitive breaker. She says she's still going to, she breaks at home, she does her thing, but she is retiring from breaking competitively. And I'm not surprised. She was not happy with all the backlash she faced after the Olympics. You remember the whole story. She failed to record a single point. Of course, everybody's using the screen grab of her infamous kangaroo move here, as you can see. But, what was she expecting was going to happen? Did she think the internet wasn't going to do its thing after that?
This is a reminder, the most. Not everyone is built for the smoke that comes with the big stages here. And I can say this in a serious sense where, hey, some of this online bullying, the access that people have to you, how big that Olympic stage is probably warping all of our brains in the worst way possible. But Dad also gives me an appreciation for the athletes that are constantly in the arena, fielding stuff like this all the time. Like the idea that more things like what happened with Joel Embiid don't happen more often based on the level of scrutiny that people seem to be under and facing from fans and media all the time is sort of amazing. And this is like a small example of when you hold up someone that's not used to that level of scrutiny in the way that no breaker from Australia was going to be heading into the Olympics. This is what can happen. This is the level of scrutiny that most of your favorite athletes just internalize and deal with 24/7.
Yeah, well, when you have that many countries around the world competing in different sports, you're going to get a different level, obviously. But losing all three of her matches by a combined 54-0. She was the best breakdancer coming out of Australia. She now it wasn't completely on her, but it's one and done for breakdancing. They're out of the Olympics. Yeah. They were in the Olympics and they're done. They're done. And while she had a part in it, she wasn't the only reason. But Are we going to miss the kangaroo bounce at all? Are
No.
we going to?
We
I
won't.
don't think
We
so.
won't.
I mean, and you feel bad for her, but you also feel bad for the other breakers that were good who now watched this woman become the face of their sport during its shot at the Olympics. We hope you look at us the face of this podcast that you like to listen to every day. That works. Download, subscribe, rate, and review it. That one sucked. I'll talk to you tomorrow.